Hi, and welcome to Matt Holman Talks Mental Health, the podcast where I have the opportunity to catch up and have conversations with amazing humans. Today, or for this episode, I have the pleasure in introducing Karen Rice to the conversation. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you, Matt. Very happy to be there. This is actually my first podcast, so I'm very excited. And I'm also very excited to talk about this very important topic. So thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're more than welcome. It's an absolute pleasure. And it's lovely to reconnect. And this is one of the things I found so valuable about these podcasts is I've had the chance to reconnect with people I haven't spoken to for such a long time. And just to give an insight into that, what that means, Karen and I have known each other for many years through a career in travel. And we go back through many conferences and events together. And Karen's based out in Canada and I'm obviously in the UK, but we used to meet up in these global events and we became sort of conference buddies and we spent time together and often drinking wine and putting the world to rights, no doubt. But Karen's just one of these amazing people that have always followed the work that I do. And I've always kept, kept an eye on where she's going with her career as well. So it's just fantastic to chat again. Welcome, Karen. You do your introduction, your proper introduction. That's my one.
Yes, so thank you, Matt. And I told him before we started this that he's my favorite person. And as you said, we've kind of superficially known each other, but we've always understood that there's a lot more under the layers. And so I welcome this opportunity. So I am a 56-year-old woman living in Toronto, Canada. I have a 25-year-old son. And I have elderly parents, so this has been part of my COVID experience, also dealing with a 25-year-old son during COVID. So it's been an interesting time. I also have a brother that's over the border in the US who we haven't seen in over a year, since Christmas last year. So that's my family. I actually was working part-time during this COVID thing, and now I've been lucky to be called back full-time. So now I'm going through the joys of getting back into corporate life and all that fun stuff. But not about my history and everything, but I really, the topic today is mental health. And I've had quite the journey, and I think the thing about being in your 50s is, and I know there's a lot of age, generations in this podcast, but I think the thing is when you get to this point in your life, you start to reflect a lot about things in your family, things that have affected you, and how you can support the next generation and my son. I also see a lot of issues with my parents as they are in their 80s and struggling with their, kind of own existence and survival. So I just wanted to maybe take a few minutes, and as I have reflected in this, preparing for this, is I do believe my family, particularly on my mother's side, had some mental health issues. And the only reason I know that is because when my mother was a child, my grandmother went away for a period of time. So my mom doesn't know how long, how old she was. She just remembers my aunt coming to care for her. And so I never really got an answer to that question, because even my mom was kept in the dark about what was going on with my grandmother. But then as I guess my mother got older, then she'd refer to things that happened in her life as my aunts and my grandmother would also go away for a period of time. And then they called that the change. And I don't know if anyone's heard that expression before, but that's kind of that generation when there was women went through menopause. Supposedly they went crazy, and no one ever talked about it, but they just sent them away to some hospital somewhere until they kind of stabilized. So anyway, that's a little bit of background about my family and trying to connect the dots as you go through life. And one of and this is hard for me to talk about, Matt, but one of the significant things that happened in my life was 25 years ago, I was divorced, and I had been married for 10 years and had a small child. And that was my kind of first fall off the cliff. And I kept it together because I had a small child, but it was very, very difficult. And I remember driving home after work to pick up my son and being in so much pain, I almost drove my car off the road. But I didn't, because I had to go pick up my son.
Yeah.
But years and years and years later, I still reflect on that moment, because I know what it's like to be at the bottom of your resources and just be in so much pain that you want the pain to stop. So whenever I have friends or colleagues or anything that are having suicidal issues or just deep depression issues, I understand that. And I remember talking to my friends years later and kind of reflecting on that kind of casually. And they were taken aback. They said, "Karen, we had no idea you're going through this." And I was like, "Well, what did you think? You know, my husband just left me and had a 6-month-old baby at home, and all my friends disappeared, you know." But in their world, they saw my strong outward, you know, hold it together kind of being, and they didn't realize that inside I was crumbling. So with the help of therapy and a very wise woman who was my therapist at the point said, "Why would you want to spend, you spent 10 years in this marriage with this person, and why would you want to wreck the next 30 years of your life because you've invested 10?" And that was the moment I went, "Oh my God, you're right. Like, I have to start moving forward. I can't keep on holding onto the past." But, you know, this was 25 years ago. I was the only one in my friend set that had, you know, and my husband had left me. So the stigma of that was very traumatic. But then a funny thing happened as well, is that one day I could not get out of bed. And I called in work and said I was sick. And that was just the one day I dropped my son off at daycare. And I remember watching Dr. Phil. And he changed my life. Really? And he was dealing with people and couples and that. And he said, "Why is your behavior not aligned to your goals? So if your goals are you know, for you to be happy, for your children to be happy, for you to be happy in your marriage, for you to, you know, be in touch with God or your inner self, be important to your family, you have career goals. Why are you, you know, disrupting that and going the other direction?" And I kind of realized this is the point where I have to focus on me, not putting my marriage back together with somebody that was not motivated to do so and not treating me properly. But so it was at that moment I actually wrote out a life plan for myself. And I still keep it. And I still have therapists going, "You did that," you know. So at the top, it was my top 5 goals. So I put myself first, or my top objectives for my life is myself. Number 2 was my son. Number 3 was my family. Number 4, and you'll laugh at this, Matt, because I wanted to be a director at the travel company. I wanted to get to be a director. That was my big thing. I was a manager. I wanted to be a director. And number 5 was obviously my family and friends. So then I devised, it was kind of like a diamond. So on the right-hand side, I think I put all my support mechanisms, such as, you know, doing therapy, spending time with friends, spending time with my family. At the time, I did get a lot of support from my church, and that was a community that I felt safe in, just because of it's odd. I was going through a divorce, but I was finding that connection by being able to go to church every week. And then I wrote out my challenges, like what's going to get in my way of that. And I can't remember what those were, but what I will tell you is a year later, I had a tick in every box on my goals. I felt that my life was more balanced. I felt more empowered. I went out to some of my friends that I hadn't seen in 20 years and I said, you know, I know I haven't really been around for 20 years, but I'm struggling with how to reinvent my life. And will you please be my friend? And to this day, these were my university friends. It's 35 years and going on, and we still are connected, 7 women. And my family, my mother, my father, I used to go out every Sunday and spend time with them, and they helped me with my son. And yeah, and I must say, I got the director position.
There you go. I was wondering about that one. Yeah, when did that happen? Yeah. Oh, bless you. Oh, well done.
And at the time, that was like really important.
Yeah.
And the lesson I learned was for every door that closes, there's another door that opens. And now looking back at that time of my life, I am happy for it because once I walk through the fire of going through that, nothing's taken me down. And I have good days and bad days, and I have days when I'm sad. I have days when I'm really happy. But I also know that I'm rock solid and I'm going to be okay.
Wow. You've told me so many things I didn't know about you. There you go. See, and this is exactly the reason we do this. It's the understanding and awareness of what your motivations are and why you are the person you present yourself to people often. And you are the strong, powerful person. And you've obviously done a lot of work on yourself, which is fantastic. In that, recognizing those challenges. I do want to go back to the point that you made very early in there, and thank you for sharing everything you shared. And it's not to sort of delve too deep, but just in terms of at that moment when you were in that crisis, right? How did you come out of that point? What happened to change that for you?
I think luckily I think this was a crisis.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't maybe I don't really know. I think the number I guess the number one thing I would say was I know I had to go home and look after my son.
Okay. Yep.
And I was not going to quit on him if I quit on myself. And I would never. And as you know, Matt, raising children is
It's fun.
a challenging thing.
Yeah.
That people don't tell you about until you get into it. Then you think, oh my gosh, but the rewards are so there, that unconditional love you have for somebody. And I unconditionally love that kid. And I wasn't gonna, every day I came home and I put on a brave face for him and got through the day. It was after he went to bed that I'd fall apart or, have moments of sadness. But I think it actually was kind of that Dr. Phil moment when he kind of said, like, you're sitting, he didn't say that to me, but what I heard from him was, you're sitting around feeling sorry for yourself because your marriage didn't work out and your husband left you. But he's a dud. In my, I had to come to that realization. And I must say, if he ever sees this, him and I are in very good terms these days, and we were both going through our own journey. So I understand that. But at the time, I had felt very let down and very, my heart was crushed. And here was this happy family that I thought I was going to have that was no longer. So I had to just make that shift of, this is your situation. You better get up every day trying to make your life great and your son's life great, or what are we all doing this for? So that was, I think, the turning point for me, where I got some energy and some just a different mindset. Does it
go on? Sorry, come on.
Does that, did I express that?
Yeah,
It's hard to.
No, you did, absolutely, because it's your story and the way that you've lived through that, of course. And I'm just trying to recognize the point when, obviously, we know the point where it was the hardest point for you and things were really difficult. And it's that point where things changed, and I think you've sort of eloquently put that piece out there around the sort of the Dr. Phil piece, but also the changes you needed to make. When was the first time you ever talked to anybody about those things? Was that a long time later, or was that quite close to that
Well, I
event?
was seeing, a counselor.
Okay.
I did make that
Right.
thing, and she once said to me, um, "Well, if you don't talk to me, who do you talk to?" And I was like, "Well, no one, because I can't burden my parents.
Right.
Like, they know I'm struggling, but they
Mm,
don't know how much I'm struggling because they would be mortified, and I don't want to wreck their lives. And I don't really want to tell my friends because I don't want to be that person that calls up every day and says, 'Oh, I'm going through a divorce and my ex-husband did this, this, and this, and I'm, at my wit's end.'
yeah.
So you don't want to be that person outwardly. So it becomes your private,
Yeah.
kind of thing you hide. And then my mother was also, I came from a generation where my mother was, don't leave the house without your lipstick and your son, she'd have pajamas underneath her coat, but she would present,
Right.
it was all about how you presented yourself outside the home. It was kind of that generation.
Mm,
So every day I'd get up and I'd put on, the happy face and, present this person that was not reflective of who I was. Now, you and I had said as well, if I hadn't washed my hair for 5 days and had my hair in a ponytail and had sweatpants on, I probably would have felt even worse. So
yeah.
this was kind of my therapy too. Um, the other thing I did is I was having a long commute because I ended up, when I got my promotion, I ended up going into the downtown office, and I had lived in the suburbs. So I had about an hour commute every day. So I ended up buying tapes. This is back in the days where you had cassette
Right.
tapes, and it was Jack Canfield, Soup for the Soul, How to Increase Your Self-Esteem.
Okay.
So every day I'd listen to an episode on the way to work and home from work. And he taught me that my inner voice was very negative. So I would get up every morning and go, well, in my mind, I think, oh shit, another day, uh, woes me. My husband left me. My
Mm,
life will never be the same. I'm ugly and I'm stupid. Those were kind of some of the inner things I
mm,
would say to myself. And I think a lot of people do that. I've had a lot of friends that I've coached through this, and
right.
when they're honest with themselves, they're actually not very nice to themselves. And I think that's one of our hardest challenges as people is to. So he ended up doing these stupid things, but they actually worked and they helped me. Is that you had to look in the mirror every day and you'd put the sticky note on the mirror and say, I'm a loving and worthwhile person. So that became my mantra every day, is instead of I'm stupid, my husband left me, I'm ugly, I'm fat, I'm whatever, it became I'm a loving and worthwhile person. And Matt, when we talk about those conferences, I went to every Christmas party by myself
Right.
for 15 years. And I had to walk in by myself without a boyfriend, without a husband. Everybody else would have their partners, and I just wasn't lucky in love.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, before I went in, I would say, "You're hot. Like, you look really good." Like, what, so I'd give myself, and like
The
sometimes
confidence
I'd look
boost.
in the mirror and go, "Oh my God, you're ugly, you're fat, and why are you here?" Just turn around and go home. But I just had this determination that I was going to participate in the party, hold my head up high, dance with all my friends' husbands that they didn't want to spend time with their husbands. So I ended up being I ended up having like a good time.
Yeah.
But at the end of it, I became somebody that every time I had to go through that, I was actually pretty proud of myself. And every time I kind of climbed a mountain to do it, but I was happy that I did it.
Brilliant. Well, it sounds like you put some good tools and resources in place to be able to do that. And with those sort of positive thoughts, affirmations, they're very powerful tools actually to sort of get you out of those bleak feelings, those darker thoughts as well, aren't they? You mentioned you sort of coached some of your friends through as well. So did they know your story, or was it you were just sort of imparting your wisdom towards them? How was that?
Um, I think most of them do, but it's funny. It's fun. I have a lot of friends my age, but I also have a lot of friends that are younger than me. That was kind of part of my reinvention. I started hanging around with younger people to have more fun.
Yeah.
But a lot of them, as they started going through their journey, I started seeing their negativity, sadness. When relationships didn't work out, they would start to get sad, and so I used a lot of those tools to really get them to shift their mindset.
Okay.
And I had one friend in particular that was very challenged. Like, she just was always down on herself. And Jack Canfield had this thing where every time you start on a bad mantra in your head, you're supposed to say cancel and then replace it with a positive mantra.
Okay.
So that was something that her and I, focused on, is that she had an ability to kind of beat herself up quite a bit internally, in that voice in her head. And we joked about it, actually. Like, we put on these British voices, Matt, and go,
Oh, thank
cancel,
you.
cancel.
I love it.
So if we put some humor behind it, but it was also changing that. And through the years, I know I get sloppy on that again. I start to think, oh, and I start to, every time sometimes you look in the mirror and you think, oh, this isn't the way I want it to be. That isn't the way I want it to be. I say, you know what? Cancel. You're a great, loving, special person. So stop being focused on the negative stuff.
Brilliant. Well, I'm loving all those thoughts. I think that it's a really good way to sort of manage your mental health in a lot of ways. And so we're leading towards the end of this conversation, because as they all are, just flying through at the moment. How do you take care of yourself now? What's your sort of routine? Do you have a routine for your self-care?
I do, and I struggle with it because I was a gym person.
Okay.
So my challenge was, I worked hard and I played hard, and then there wasn't really enough left for me in between that. It was so I every New Year's I make myself a promise I'm not going to work 67 hours a week. And interestingly enough, last year I promised myself I wasn't going to work Sundays, because I was in this routine where I would work Sundays, ramping up for the week. And I finally said, no, I'm not working evenings, and I'm not working Sundays. And that includes Saturdays, but Saturday was always my day off. So that's number one. And obviously COVID solved some of that problem. But I'm back into the full-time routine and trying to keep myself balanced. So I just bought an exercise bike. So I'm trying to do the hour a day. That's kind of my new thing. And I'm also doing meditation. So I've never been able to meditate before. I've always just never had the time. So I've been lucky that I have a friend who is very much into meditation, yoga, and she has a nice title, but I forget what it is right now. But she has got me into a few 21-day challenges with the meditation. And so I've really tried to focus on doing that once a day. And she just started a new series that I started on Monday, which is going through all your chakras. And it's just really 20 minutes a day. But I just noticed that it helps me get more in touch with the challenges that I have and how to. I'll give you, do we have enough time left? I've just got a quick example.
Go for it. Yeah.
And I think this, as you say, these are difficult times with the COVID, and I was struggling myself last spring. I was working part-time and I couldn't get anything done. And then I listened to a meditation with Deepak Chopra, and Oprah was in it, one of my favorite people as well. And Oprah told a story about her, I think she wasn't a swim. She didn't learn how to swim as a child, and it was something about, she learned in her own journey that she had learned to swim, but she kept on trying to swim upstream. And this is an analogy for her,
Yeah.
what was going on in her life. And I realized that I think with work in particularly, I was trying to swim upstream and I wasn't realizing the reality of we had no resources. We had no, this was kind of the way of the world. I couldn't keep on pushing to get things accomplished when they really, there were no resources to get them accomplished. So that was kind of a lesson for me, that all of a sudden I realized I need to go downstream, go with the flow of the river. And if things don't work out the way I want them to, I need to be accepting of that, and stop trying to make things so difficult for myself, because I have a lot of tenacity. And when I want things to happen a certain way, I want them to happen. But
Yeah.
through the meditation, I realize I have to flow with the stream.
Yeah. I think that's wonderful. Yeah, flow with the stream, and it's so in tune with the whole thing about mental health. You know, you've got to go with it sometimes and see where it goes and where it takes you to. Karen, we are out of time now. We've come to the end of this, and it's just been lovely to hear you talking, to see your face, to reminisce a little bit before we joined the recording of this, of course. But thank you so much for sharing your story, and thank you so much, and I know there's much more you could have shared, I'm sure, but thank you so much for sharing what you said, because it's powerful and it's real and it's you, and I love that, and I think that's just fantastic. So any final comment you want to say?
So with my journey, I've learned a lot, but one thing I didn't know until recently is that I think I know a lot more than kind of the average person because of my journey and because of my experiences with some of my friends and family.
Yeah.
So one final thought is, don't assume that everybody knows what you know. And if you see somebody in crisis or there's things that aren't adding up, speak up.
Yeah.
And that's the best kind of advice I can give to everybody, is follow your intuition. If you think something's off with yourself, with anybody in your circle, don't think that they know what you know, and it's worth the chance to save a life.
Yeah.
And really call something out if you know it's something's not good.
Brilliant. No, thank you for sharing that. And as I always say at the end of these, if anybody does need extra help or does want to talk to anybody, please do reach out to somebody. There are always organizations available to talk to, and and please do know there is always somebody there who will listen. It's so important. Karen, thank you so much for this session. I really have appreciated it. I love it. This is the 5th episode in the podathon. Very shortly be moving on to the next one, but this one was amazing, as I knew it would be. Lovely to see you, and I will catch up with you very soon. So thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Love you.
See you later.